So this might come as a bit of a shock, but end rhyme, i.e. Rhyming the last word of each sentence in a poem, hasn't been in Western Europe for very long at all. It is likely that end rhyme was introduced into Europe once again also by the Moors. This is where the last words of the lines rhyme. Dwight F Reynolds from the University of California states that at this time in history, there were only three cultures in the world who used end rhyme. That was the Chinese, the Indians, and the Arabs. French troubadours were inspired by the Arabic poets who were at the time singing court girls. These troubadours then travelled to England to spread and use and popularise their art form. Poetry led to songs. Today, there's a question as to would we have had rhyming songs in the charts if it was not for the Moorish influence on poetry. Now, by the 10th century BC, the Moors had already expanded across northern Africa and into southern Spain. For 800 years, Spain would remain a Muslim country under the Moors. Cordoba would, in many ways, resemble a modern city today. By 950 AD, Cordoba had a population of at least 1 million residents, paved streets, 200,000 properties, 60,000 mansions and palaces, running water, 900 public baths, and many private baths. This is all by the time of 950 AD, over 1,000 years ago. Education was universal and was offered to both boys and to girls. Over 1,000 mosques flourished. The Great Mosque had over 1,000 columns made of jasper, marble, porphyr, which lifted a golden and scarlet roof. The Cordobans also had access to commerce via 4,000 markets and 80,000 shops. Due to the extensive trade routes throughout the Moorish Empire, they had access to Chinese tea, Indian spices, Russian furs, African ebony, and ivory. Previously, the Arabs had invaded Egypt and the rest of North Africa. Many Africans fled from North Africa to the lands south of the Sahara. Those who remained in the area, i.e. Northern Africa, converted to Islam. The Moorish Empire boasted many strong leaders over the centuries who accomplished many amazing feats. But the good isn't without the bad. Many leaders worsened political and civil relations, making the empire more vulnerable as it started to become more fractioned. Hisham I, whose nickname was the Just, in 788 AD. Hisham I was known as the Just due to his compassionate personality and philanthropic nature. In 788 AD, Hisham had enhanced intellectual and cultural pursuits, recruiting poets, scholars, and scientists. He also welcomed political refuge to those who were fleeing tyranny. He personally visited the sick and the disabled and hired guards to patrol the streets and to keep neighborhoods safe. He also rebuilt the bridge of Cordoba, which was originally 1st century Roman. And this took at the time a lot of effort and a lot of engineering ability and mathematical ability at the same time. We also have Al-Hakam, who ruled around 796 AD. Now, Al-Hakam was different. He ruled with an iron fist. In 803 AD, he squashed a Muslim rebellion, killed 5,000 opponents, crucified nobles, and recruited 5,000 Slavic mercenaries. After the people revolted over harsh taxes, he squashed the rebellion and exiled 25,000 people to Africa, Alexandria, and Fez. Well, this is Alexandria and Fez within Africa. Abu al-Hassan, Ali ibn Nafi Ziryab, who was also known as the Black Bird, was a non-ruler and was a Middle Eastern singer and gentleman, known by the nickname as Ziryab, which means blackbird. He was born in 822 AD. Ziryab was an out-and-out trendsetter who influenced much of the luxury which we see even today. Ziryab normalized seasonal wear, i.e. to dress differently in each season, popularized the use of deodorant and perfume. He also replaced goblets with crystal glasses and introduced the etiquette of the three-course meal. For the first time, a starter, a main and a dessert were served rather than a typical feast where all food was served at once. So we can see here a transition forming, right? We have a lot of Europeans who were eating in essentially, or living in barns. They didn't have running water, they didn't have a sewage system, they didn't have seasonal wear, they ate with their hands at more feasts, so basically just dipping in and eating what you can. And here we have Ziryab, the blackbird, who is revolutionizing how we carry ourselves in Western Europe. He's basically introducing fine dining. So every time that you go to a restaurant and you're eating with knives and forks rather than your hands, and you're having three-course meals, and you've got your nice seasonal wear that you get out, so you dip into to your wardrobe and pull out different clothes for different seasons. This is all thanks to Ziryab from North Africa. Now, however, complacency was soon to lead the Moors into trouble. Abd al-Rahman had reduced the spending on the standing army and had instead preferred to invest in cultural and scientific development. Fantastic for culture, but bad for defence. Over an extended period of time, the Moors had grown increasingly reliant on mercenaries from other lands. This was further creating factions within the Moorish Empire. By 796 AD, Al-Hakam had recruited 5,000 Slavic mercenaries. The use of the mercenaries grew over the following centuries, once again fragmenting Moorish control. However, at the same time, from the north, Christian powers were simultaneously growing as Moorish sophistication was at its height. By 1095 AD, Pope Urban II ordered a crusade to remove Islam from the Holy Lands. This was to prevent Islamic influence from taking over Christendom, which we can kind of already see happening at that time. Now, I want to frame this slightly different for you. I want to bring the same context to a modern day vicinity. Task for you. In 2001, George Bush announced a crusade on terrorism shortly after the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Centers by the Taliban. The Visigoths and other Spanish tribes wanted economic control over Spain. This is what we see during the Spanish Reconquista, and also arguably during the Crusades. Now, many people argued that the war in Afghanistan and Iraq was also for economic power. You can see the parallels here. Why would a leader want to brand a war for economic power as a religious war? I.e., why would something which is very obviously for economic gain be put down to religious or spiritual gain? What is the advantage and disadvantage of describing a war which you've waged for economic gain as a war under religious pretense? What is the advantage and disadvantage of doing so? Please explore as a group. Feel free to put yourself into different groups, have group discussions under the guidance of your teacher, and you can resume the lesson whenever you're ready to start again.